What's up, family, and welcome back to another episode of the Melanin Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Cori, and I am so excited about today's episode as we continue exploring things that affect Black women and women in general during National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. This is a topic that is often ignored, overlooked, and dismissed in the Black community. And the treat that I have for you today, I am so excited about. But before we begin, y'all know how we do over here. We always begin every single episode with 30 seconds of gratitude. And as always, when we have guests, we allow our guests to begin first. Leah, bless the audience with your gratitude.
Seconds of gratitude. Okay, so I am grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that I woke up this morning. I'm clothed in my right mind. I'm ability of my limbs. As the old folk would say, the fact that I know my name because somebody woke up this morning and didn't know their name this morning, and the fact that I'm alive in the land of the living one more time. So yeah, that is what I'm grateful for today.
I love that because those are things that we often take for granted. Those small things such as waking up, breathing air in and out of our lungs, blinking our eyes, our feet taking us from our beds to our bathrooms, our hands picking up our phones, driving our car, picking up your cup of coffee. Things like that we take for granted so very often, when those are the things that we often should be the most grateful for. Yeah. So anytime that you sit back and if somebody says, what do you have to be grateful for? And you say, well, I don't have anything to be grateful for. I say, if you're speaking to me, you have something to be grateful for. And practicing gratitude is not about ignoring the hard times and the tough things you may be experiencing. It's about recognizing that in this moment, this is what I am blessed to have. And when you are walking in that space, it opens the door for more possibility, more abundance, more blessings, more light. Now, y'all, we already know that was more than 30 seconds because it always is. Because over here, we believe in that. So today, I have the distinct honor to have my good friend on the show. She is the Culture Doctor, and I absolutely love what she is doing in the field of sexual assault awareness. I know who she is, and I could go on and on and on about her. However, I am going to allow her to introduce herself to the Melanin Wellness Podcast family. Leah, you have the floor.
Listen, it's an honor to be here with you, sis. What's up, family? So if you are new to me, I am Leah M, Forney, the Culture Doctor, sexual assault thriver turned advocate and activist. I love to tell people I'm just an unapologetically dope Black woman who loves the Lord and cusses a little or a lot depending on the situation. But yeah, I have been an advocate and an activist in the field of sexual violence for the last 10 years. I am a survivor myself, soon to be 10-time published author. And so many other things. But listen, I'm just your sis here today. Like, we just gonna have some real conversation, and I'm super excited to be here.
I love that, y'all. I absolutely love that. I am so glad to have you here, my friend. I'm so glad that we can make this happen because y'all, when I tell you that this lady is busy, okay? So her penciling in this little bit of time for us, I am so grateful for that. Okay,
Listen.
Y'all, you know, okay, because she got some big things coming up. We're going to get to that later. We're going to get to that a little later. So, Leah, my first question to you today is your work as the Culture Doctor is so transformative for so many people. Can you share what inspired you to step into this space and become a disruptor of outdated sexual violence and response systems?
Yeah, so it started with my own lived experience. I got sexually assaulted about 11, almost 12 years ago. And when I was sexually assaulted, my first reason why I did not want to report was because I'm a Black woman in America, right? So the first thing that went through my mind was, I'm Black, I'm a woman, who's going to believe me, right? And I remember going to my spiritual father, my bishop at the time, who was former law enforcement, and he was encouraging me to report because he was like, listen, we have to catch this guy, you know, it's important that we report. But again, I was hesitant because I'm like, don't nobody believe people like me, right? And so it took me 2 days to actually report. And when I did make the report, I was met with my fear. Like, literally, the Black male detective that came to my apartment to take the report literally asked me 5 to 7 times, was I absolutely sure that I was sexually assaulted? Because I said I went on one date with the guy. And then the female detective that showed up to like give me some guidance on what I was supposed to do next, she was very cold and callous. Like, there was no compassion. And you would think that woman to woman, like you would be able to empathize with me, but there was none of that. And so she was extremely rigid. She was very black and white, very like, look, you got to go to the hospital, you got to get a rape kit. This is what needs to happen. Then you got to pick them out of the lineup, all these things. And so I did, I went to the hospital, I got the rape kit, and I will tell you, it was being met with a forensic nurse and the victim advocates there that really changed it for me, because they were the most sweetest, most compassionate group of people that I had ever met. Like, very like, how can I support you? What do you need? Walked me through the entire process. And so finally, when we had our day in court, just to get a restraining order, I had a white male judge who basically told me, I don't believe you were sexually assaulted. I think you're a woman scorned. And he proceeded to get off his bench, go into his chambers, never dismissed the case, came back and was like, oh, you're still here? Case dismissed. And so I watched my perpetrator literally walk out the courtroom with a smirk on his face, like he was in victory. I'm bawling, crying, right? And then I had a white male sheriff who came to me and was like, if you don't get it together, I'm going to arrest you. Wow. And I'm like, the irony, like the person that should be getting arrested, right, is walking out the door. And so it was in that moment that I literally had to make a decision. I had to decide how I was going to move forward, because the justice system was not going to give me justice. And so from there, I decided to go ahead and contact the local rape crisis center and get into therapy and start my own healing journey. But that was the experience that made me say, okay, I need to step up. And I need to help and advocate for people that look like me.
It's so interesting that you say that your first thought, instead of, oh my God, let me go and do this so that he doesn't get away with this, so that he doesn't hurt somebody else, was, I don't want to tell because nobody's going to believe me. And I think that is often the first thought that Black women have. The differences between the way that rape is in America for white women and for Black women, the differences are night and day. And that's oftentimes why many of us don't come forward with our stories, because, even within our own families, if it happens, we're not believed. And so that is often the taboo within the Black community that keeps many of us from actually stepping forward and reporting and receiving any type of justice. Even sometimes just the speaking your truth is a certain type of justice, even without actual legal justice. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I always tell survivors is you have to do what I call redefine justice, right? Because I think we think the only path to justice is going to the police. But if you're a Black and brown person, you ain't going to the cops, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
We don't even like the cops, right? Like, we have a huge distrust with law enforcement, and we have a huge distrust with healthcare systems as well, absolutely. Right? So I think one of the things I always tell survivors when I encounter them is figure out, what does your path to justice look like? Because it doesn't have to be making a report, right? You get to redefine it for yourself. Sometimes justice looks like just making peace with it for yourself. Sometimes it looks like speaking up and sharing your story. You get to define it, right? Because it looks different for everybody, and it does not always mean you have to do what people think you should do, which is call the cops.
Right. I really appreciate you saying that, because there may be someone here listening that does think the only path to justice is some sort of going to law enforcement, when oftentimes that is not going to be what justice looks like for Black women in America. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face when you're advocating for survivor-centered and trauma-informed approaches? Like, what are some of the biggest roadblocks?
How much time do we have?
We got all the time you need.
You know what? Honestly, I think the biggest barrier that I face every single day is getting law enforcement to understand that the system has failed these people, right? And it's hard to do that because it's also the same system that pays them, right? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. And so getting them to recognize that when I say stuff like you need to issue an apology, I'm not saying that you need to personally take ownership. I need you to recognize that the system has failed these individuals that you're encountering. And so oftentimes that is like one of the biggest barriers that I go up against with law enforcement, because I literally hear them say, well, I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my case. And it's like, I didn't say take personal accountability. I said recognize that the system failed these individuals. So that would probably be one big barrier. The other thing is just like you really hear how people feel about survivors, right? So in the work that I do, I also do work with incarcerated survivors. And it's amazing to hear how people feel about people that are incarcerated that also get sexually violated, right? Because they'll literally say stuff like, well, they in jail. Like, I mean, that's not my problem that they got raped. And it's like, yeah, but rape is not a part of the penalty, right?
Exactly.
Like just because they are locked up, that's not a part of the penalty. So I think it's very triggering. You know, people always ask me like, do I ever get triggered telling my story? I'm like, no, I've done it for the last 12 years. But what triggers me is when you sit down and you hear how people really feel about survivors of sexual violence and you hear the dumb stuff that law enforcement says and people in corrections say, and just people in like, you know, our Congress and our senators. Like I go to legislative sessions and you just hear the stuff and you're just like, did that really just come out your mouth? So those are the things that I would say are like the biggest barriers.
You know, it's so funny how it's almost as though, and this has become a huge thing within the law enforcement realm, is that they make them personally like intertwined with that system or with their jobs when it's really not. Like it's two separate entities. However, it's like they take that as it becomes their identity.
Yeah.
And it's like they lose their identity. So accepting responsibility is like, it's like, oh no, we're not going to do that. And absolutely, I agree with you. Like, I don't care in or out of the penal system. Like, your body is not for somebody else's usage, you know? And I think that when people look at us, especially Black women, they look at us as objects. They don't look at us as people.
Oh, yeah.
They look at us as objects that is there for their use and their entertainment. It is demonstrated so many times throughout history in the way that they would make sideshows of us and our bodies and the way we were made and how they over-sexualize our girls. You know, it's a very deeply systemic issue. It's not surface at all. So many response systems to sexual violence still to this day lack that cultural competence and true survivor support. What are some of the most harmful flaws in these systems that you're witnessing today?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that we have a traditional one-size-fit-all model, right? So one of the things that I do as the cultural doctor is train organizations and institutions on how to be culturally sensitive, right? And cultural sensitivity says that I recognize that there are some cultural and historic nuances that play a role in how people that don't look like me respond to trauma. Right.
Yeah.
And so the horrible thing about the sexual violence movement for the 20 plus years we've been doing this is that we have this very traditional model, and the traditional model says what works for one should work for everybody else. And so what I do is I come in and I disrupt and dismantle that model. And I say, no, it does not work like that. Right. Like what works for Susan is not going to work for Tamika. And that's the actual title of my new book. But that's what I started telling people was that because what happens with the traditional model is it literally excludes those that you say you want to work with, right? Because what you're doing is you're not tailoring their services to meet their unique needs. You're basically saying it worked for Susan over here, so it should work for Tamika, it should work for Jessica. It should work. No, like every person, every survivor you encounter has its own unique needs. And depending on their cultural background, it's even more, right? Because if you take like an indigenous survivor, for instance, they believe in traditional healing. So they're not going to even get down with your westernized way of doing things because in their mind, they believe in shamans and other ways of healing. And so cultural sensitivity says, I now have to understand, take some time to research, get to know these diverse populations in the communities that I'm serving, and make sure that I am creating the types of services that really respond to their unique needs.
Yeah, and oftentimes they don't. Is it that, now from your perspective, is it that it's just not something that is of interest to them, or is it something that you think that maybe it makes them more uncomfortable and it will cause them to have to face some true biases that they may have of their own the reason why there's such that difference when it comes to culturally to treating survivors?
Yeah, I think it's threefold. So I think there's a part of it that it just doesn't matter to them. I think another part of it is that I have to come face to face with my own implicit bias, which cultural sensitivity is about. And then I also think it's lack of education. Right.
Okay.
I think that especially for those who have been in the field 10 plus years, like I have, like you almost become like numb to the process. You almost become very like rigid, like it's been working. Why change it now? Right. But that's where they hire me. And that's where I come in, because it's not that it's not working. It's the fact that it can be working better. And the reason why you can't get people to come through your doors like you want them to is because you're not factoring in cultural sensitivity, right? So like when I teach this to organizations, I always tell them that people that look like me come with two sets of barriers, right? So they come in with barriers to accessing services, which is those barriers that keep them from coming through your doors. And then there's the barriers of accepting services, right? Which is the barriers that keep them from actually accepting the help. So oftentimes organizations are dealing with both and they don't know what to do. So it's like, I can't get them to come in my doors. And when they do show up, they don't stay, right? And so what I teach them is you have to understand those cultural nuances and how they respond to trauma, what sexual violence looks like for a person that's Black or brown or indigenous, right? Right. And you have to understand that things like lack of representation is going to be the reason why they don't stay. Because if I walk into your doors and I don't see someone that looks like me, the likelihood of me staying is very slim. And so I train cultural sensitivity and sexual violence that way, because I want them to understand that it's not enough for you to have a Black or brown receptionist, right? You got to have Black and brown leadership. You have to have a therapist that looks like them, because the reality is for us, we find safety in people that look like us.
Yes.
And so if you don't understand that, tack that on with the fact that most of us come with layers of trauma, right? So I always tell people, like, by the time an adult goes and gets help, we talking about generations of trauma that they're dealing with that has been passed down. And don't let that same adult be a victim of child sexual abuse, because that's most likely unhealed. So you got child sexual abuse, you got generations of trauma. Tack that on with their cultural and historic nuances. Tack that on with all these barriers, like I don't trust, law enforcement. I don't trust the system, right? And then they just recently got sexually assaulted. You got to work through all of that.
Yeah.
All of that just to get them to a place where they're ready to do the work. And so that is why it's so important to be culturally sensitive. That is why it's important to do this type of work and allow people like myself to train you, because that's what's keeping them from coming in your doors. You can get them to show up. The reason why they're not staying is because they're looking around at these things. And if you're not willing to address these things, then yeah, you're going to keep having a revolving door.
Like when you were saying all of this, like I was like clapping so loud and screaming in my head, because let me tell you something. I can remember when I finally decided to start therapy and start trying to heal my own traumas. And my very first therapist was a white woman. She was nice enough. But to be honest with you, I left there feeling more traumatized because there are nuances about Black women that other people just do not get. And I do not have time to be the victim sitting here trying to teach you and inform you of how you're supposed to be helping me. I don't have time for that. I don't got time to explain my existence. I don't have time to explain why we say this and why we say that and how we feel certain ways. And it wasn't until I found a Black therapist that I really started to see my healing really start taking off in the direction I needed to. So I was like just screaming my head off on the inside just now when you were talking.
No, that's real. And I want to say this too, because there are some culturally sound, culturally sensitive Caucasian and non-Black therapists and professionals out there. Like my therapist, when I went through a rape crisis center, was a culturally sensitive white woman and was amazing in getting me through that time in my life, right? So there are some, they're not enough, right? And again, to your point, that's because there's so many that are sitting back waiting on somebody to educate them instead of doing the work to educate themselves, right? Because I tell organizations all the time, like survivors are everywhere. They're in the places you work, they're in the places you live, they're in the places you go to school, they're in the places that you worship, right? they're everywhere. They're in every industry. And so it is your job to make sure you're equipping yourself with the education and the knowledge, right, to make sure you know how to address their needs. And if you can't, hire someone like me who can come in and teach you the things that you need to know, right, to get it done.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I can speak this for myself. I can spot other survivors.
Absolutely.
I don't even have to speak to you to know that there's a certain way that we move. There's a certain way that we don't move. There are certain things we do and don't say. It's just, there's an unspoken language, and I know how to spot us when I see one of us out in public. And like, you can kind of see, especially when there are things that trigger us, and certain reactions come, and people are thinking that we're just losing it, or we're just being unreasonable in the moment, without pausing first to think, wait, nobody just does that. You know, people don't just react that way for no reason. While it may seem overreaction to us, there's something else behind it. I don't know. That's just me. That's how I try to treat people when I see people in public.
Yeah.
So I have a question. How do people move from performative allyship to actually helping to create systemic changes when it comes to supporting survivors?
Yeah. You know, I can't stand performative allyship, but
baby.
So I would say the way that you make that move is, one, you have to really be honest with yourself, check your own implicit bias, right? Also recognize your privilege, right? Like, I think a lot of reasons why people are even afraid to get into this type of work is because of their privilege, right? Recognize your privilege, recognize that there are people that don't look like you, that don't have that the tools, the resources, the access that you have, right? Educate yourself. Like, really take the time to educate yourself. Don't wait on somebody else to educate you. Like, really take the time to research a marginalized community and really like get the understanding of their historical context, their cultural context. You know what I mean? And then I always tell people, like, allyship is really about coming on alongside someone that's already doing the work and supporting them, right? But truly support them. One of the ways that you can stop being a performative ally is to put your money where your mouth is, right? Like, support those organizations that are doing this work, right? Support people that don't look like you, right? Don't just pick a day on the calendar and be like, oh, it's Black History Month, so I'm gonna go out here and support Black people. Like, support them 24/7, 7 days a week. Support that economic justice. Support that reproductive health justice. Support them in the voting booths. Like, that's how you really shift, right? Because when we need you in your dollars, right? Yes, Black people by ourselves, we make up a good majority when it comes to the wealth. And that's why our dollars are powerful. But it's nothing like having someone that doesn't look like us that puts their money where their mouth is and says, I'm going to support you in the work that you're doing. So that's how you make that shift. Like, educate yourself, be willing to check your own implicit bias, definitely be willing to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? But also put your money where your mouth is. Support the organizations that are out there doing the work and pushing the movement forward, because that's where the real allyship and the advocacy work is happening.
All right. So just so y'all know, I want y'all to know that number is $1 trillion, family. $1 trillion. $1 trillion. That's the Black dollar. Okay. $1 trillion. All right. So we just gonna leave that there. And I also want to touch on the fact about that you talked about is learning the cultural background and the cultural history, because it's unfortunate, but some white women believe that they actually didn't participate in slavery. And when you have those kinds of thought processes and those types of untruths spinning around, of course, they're going to feel removed from the situation, and they're going to simply just be social media activists. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's not fitting to move the needle.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. I mean, it's necessary, right? Because like I always tell people, like, digital activism is just as powerful as everyday boots on the ground activism, right? But it's also like, again, figuring out where are you comfortable showing up at, right? Like, everybody's not meant to be an activist. Everybody's not meant to be an advocate. Some people are comfortable just being an ally, right? Because an ally, their main role is to just support, right? Their main role is to be like, let me repost that post. Like, that's their main role. Everybody is not supposed to be doing what I do, which is boots on the ground every single day. Like, some people don't have the bandwidth. Some people don't have the strength to do it, right? Because here's what I always tell people. Advocacy and activism is a long long-term game. If you're not trying to be in this for the long term, don't get in it. I've been doing it for 10 years. I was just praying to the good Lord the other day. I was like, I got a good hot 10, maybe 15 left. And then we passing the baton, sir. I'm just telling you that now, right? Because I've been doing it for so long. So if you're not really ready to be long-term advocacy, activism, don't do it. Sometimes your job is to be the ally, is to be the supporter, is to be the one that pushes and comes alongside those that are really doing the work.
Yeah, I agree. And also making sure that you are calling out some of these things so that instead of, commenting negatively on a Black woman's body or listening to someone else who may be commenting on a Black woman's body in a negative manner, call that out and be like, okay, all right, like, why are we examining her body that way?
Yeah.
Because those are the kinds of things that make it to where we are over sexualized, causing people to be less likely to believe that someone is assaulting us. We can't help how we made.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, we have the conversation with the wrong people anyway.
Yes.
That's the thing I tell people all the time. Like, prevention conversations should never happen with victims and survivors, because the message there says that you can do something to prevent yourself from being sexually violated. And the truth of the matter is that is absolutely not true. You can't do anything to prevent yourself from being sexually violated. So that's one of the reasons why my approach is always response and recovery. Because I'm like, we're beating the prevention dead horse. Like, the people that you should be talking to about prevention is potential perpetrators. That's who you should be educating about prevention. You should not be educating victims and survivors about prevention, right? And I think that's where we dropped the ball, because we put a lot of taxpayer dollars into prevention, which is great. I'm not saying we shouldn't. But when we do that, we exclude a whole group of people that have already been violated, who are like, I don't know how to recover. Because those are the ones that I encounter in every training that I do. Those are the ones that have been sitting there talking about they were sexually assaulted at 13, and here they are at 50 some years old and they're still stuck. Right. So we have to really balance the scales and stop putting so much money into prevention that we don't put enough into response and recovery, because that's where our tax dollars need to go, because there's a group of us that are still trying to figure out, how do they recover? How do they heal from sexual violence?
So speaking of recovery, what are some immediate tangible steps that organizations can take to create those safer, more inclusive spaces for?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you got to be survivor led. Don't be an organization that says that you work for or are doing work for survivors and you don't have survivors a part of your organization, right? Like, the survivors really should be leading your programs. They should be the ones that you go to figure out what it is that they need. One of the things that I teach on when I talk about cultural sensitivity is shifting from what I call from for to with, right? So for is this notion that I'm speaking for you, right? So I think I know what you want. I am just out there being like, this is what you want, so I'm gonna create this thing. With is saying that I come alongside the survivors and I ask them, hey, what do you need? How can I support you? What does that look like, right? And so a lot of organizations have been operating in the for too long. And that's that traditional model that says, I know what you want, so I'm going to give it to you, right? That's that tokenism that says, I'll invite you to the table, but I won't let you say nothing. We have to shift from there to the place of with, where we stop inviting people to the table and not giving them decision-making power. So we have to be survivor-led. We have to bring survivors to the table and really hear directly from them. What is it that you need? What does support look like from you? How can we create better programs, right? So that can look like doing listening sessions, right? Inviting them to a table. I told one organization, I said, you can have an information session. When's the last time you did an open house? And invited them there to learn more about you. Because here's the other truth. Reasons why people struggle with keeping their doors open is because a lot of people don't know you exist, because you're expecting people to show up at your door. Real community outreach, real community engagement goes to them, right? So you got to show up in the places and spaces that they are. And that even includes digitally, right? Because some people go straight to Facebook as if that is the only platform that people hang out at. And so I always be like, no, go where they hang out at. But the way to figure out where they hang out at and what they want is you got to bring them to the table. You got to ask them, hey, what does support look like for you? What does recovery look like for you? How can I support you? What are your needs? Because here's the other truth. A lot of organizations where they struggle is because they forget that many survivors have to choose. So if you only have a organization that's open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I work 9 to 5, that means I got to take a day off to come get some help. That means
then got to explain why you taking the day off.
I got to explain it. Tack that on if I'm a single mom with some kids, right? I got to make sure my children are straight. That's also taking money out of my house. Because if I don't got no PTO, right? Because I'm working one of them jobs where I ain't getting no PTO, that's less money on my check, right?
Yeah.
So all of those things are the reason why I'm not going to get help. It's not that I don't want it. I just can't afford it, right? And so these are the things that organizations have to think about is stop creating programs that you speaking for them, bring them to the table, but then also be very flexible in your approach, right? Don't be so rigid where you only do 9 to 5. Maybe you do mobile type of events where you pop up in the community, right? Maybe you're out there in the community. Listen, Sexual Assault Awareness Month is the month of April. I'm always in the community. I'm at every community event. Why? Because I want survivors to know, hey, I'm out here. I'm present, right? If you need me, this is how you can reach me. Those types of things. So I think those are the things that we have to do. We have to start bringing them to the table, and we have to be willing to give them decision-making power. And the last thing I would say is be okay with taking a step back, because too many organizations are speaking up for them, and then they're inviting them to the table, which is classic tokenism, but then you want them to be quiet. This is why I always tell people I'm a firm believer that every organization that wants a survivor to speak for them or to do something for them, you should be paying them, because survivors are experts. They are just as much of an expert as someone with a degree. And I stand on that. Like, don't just ask them to come and do something for free, because really you're perpetuating the same cycle, the same system that you claim you stand against. You just doing the same thing, only you just calling it, I'm giving them an opportunity, but you're pimping them out just like the system that they don't want to work with is pimping them out.
Exactly.
Girl, like, again, I'm just saying.
I'm snapping. Okay. Because, what you were saying, talking about get up and get out into the community, that is going to be part of what's going to help break that mold of one size fits all to helping everybody. Because like you said, when you are speaking and walking beside them, with them, you are recognizing, okay, Keisha is going to be different than Tiffany. It's going to be different than Karen. It's going to be different than Tony. It's going to be different than Sally. And you'll best be able to serve survivors when they feel like, I have a place that I know is going to see me.
Yeah.
No matter what I look like, they're going to see me, not just see victim.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes victims lose their identities, especially when they come forward, because they then just become the victim. They don't have their names and their identities and the people who love them and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of, and it just kind of has them to get lost, and they don't want to become or be known as the girl who got raped or the girl who, nobody wants to be labeled that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope that anyone listening and any organizations listening, just be mindful of that when you are, attempting to help survivors.
Mm-hmm.
So for survivors that are navigating healing in environments that may not fully support them, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I would tell them definitely speak up, right? A lot of times people don't know what they don't know, right? And so it's always best to educate folk or speak up or just point something out. One of the things I always tell survivors is when they send you that survey, when an organization sends you that survey, complete the survey, right? Because that's real-time feedback, and that gives them a clue as to where they're going wrong, right? Because a lot of times they don't know where they're going wrong, right? So you can help them by being willing to share with them, hey, this has been my experience. This is where I can see I can improve and do better, that kind of thing. So definitely, I would say speak up. The other thing I would say is, treat these organizations like you treat a date. You don't, just because one situation didn't work out, you don't be like, oh, I'm done dating. right? Like you get back out there, right? So do the same thing when you're seeking help. Like be okay with testing out various different organizations until you find the one that works for you, right? But I would also say have a criteria. Like, what are you actually looking for, right? Like, what are you looking for in these organizations? What kind of help are you seeking? You know, do your due diligence. And then I would also say have some consultations, right? Like I would tell you when I was looking for a therapist, listen, I got on about 5 or 6 consultations, like that little 10, 15 minutes, had my questions ready. Like based on how you answer them questions was going to determine who was going to be my therapist, right? Like, because again, this is your life. So you want to make sure that who's ever coming alongside you and supporting you in this most crucial moment can be there for the long haul and can actually get you to where you want to be, which is on the other side in healing and recovery. So that's what I would say.
Now, what would you say to survivors? Because sometimes survivors don't necessarily know what they need. All they know is that they are in this immense amount of pain all the time. And it is something that you carry with you day in and day out. It's on the inside. People can't see it on the outside. So while you may be smiling, hair may be perfectly done, nails are perfectly done, outfit is on point, but you have this ache on the inside of you that it just feels like it won't let you loose. Like, what is it that you would say to survivors to help them to kind of weeding out of that darkness to figure out this is what I need so that I can start to heal?
Yeah, I think first you got to acknowledge where you are, right? So I remember I went and spoke at a university a few months ago, and this young man, I could tell, like, it's always a survivor in the room. Always. Like, I don't care where I'm at, there's always one. And I remember this young man came up to me right after, and he said to me, I think something happened to me. But he was bawling when he said it. And I held his hand and I said, baby, you don't think you know. I said, and you know how I know you know? Because your body knows, right? And there's an incredible book called The Body Keeps the Score. I highly recommend it. It teaches you how trauma stays stored in your body. And I literally said, by the fact that you're emotional and you're crying while you're holding my hand, and you're like, he was squeezing my hand and everything, tells me that you know something happened because your body knows something happens. And I said, the first step to your healing is going to be, you have to acknowledge what happened. You're going to have to say to yourself, I know something happened. As hard as that is, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to admit that someone touched you, that admit that someone violated you, right? So you start with acknowledging it. I would then say, find someone you trust, even if it's a trusted friend. Like if you got that BFF, that's your ride or die that you can trust, like go to that person and just be like, look, something happened to me. I'm not really ready to talk about it. I don't even know what I need right now. I just know I need to be supported, right? And then have that person kind of help navigate you through that journey. Because when I got sexually assaulted, I went to my spiritual mom, God rest her soul. And she immediately grabbed me, held me in her arms, and literally said, it's not your fault. And I just needed to hear that in that moment, right? I'm bawling my eyes out. It was like the words, it's not your fault, just began to unlock something for me. And then from there, did I find the courage to be like, okay, I can call the police. I can make the report. I can so I would definitely say start with acknowledging it. Find that trusted person that can validate what happened to you without getting all in your business. Cause you got some folk that they just messy and all that good stuff, but find that real trusted person that's willing to hold your hand through the process while you figure it out, and know that it is okay that you don't know what you need in the moment. Sometimes you just need someone to be present. That's not going to ask you 50 million questions, right? But just sit there, right? And be present. Because the truth of the matter is when you go through a violation like a sexual violation, you got to grieve that because you just lost a part of you.
Yes.
There's a part of you that will never come back. I always tell people there's a part of Leah that will never come back because I've been violated, right?
Yes.
And so you got to start a grieving process. Because you got to grieve that part of you, right? So definitely take it day by day, take it minute by minute, hour by hour, but start with acknowledging where you are, right? Because then once you do that, it's like the floodgates begin to open. And then little by little, you'll get to the place where you can redefine justice and you can figure out what does my path look like to healing? Because it looks different for everybody. I tell people all the time, like after that day in court, it took them 9 years to test my rape kit. And when they called me back 9 years later, and was like, hey, we got a DNA match. What would you like me to do? I'm like, well, you always had this DNA because I didn't lie about what happened to me. But even that wasn't enough for me to say, oh, well, let's go back through the court system because you failed me the first time. You know what I'm saying? So I had to redefine justice for myself. And justice looked like doing the work that I get to do every single day of my life and helping survivors and advocating for survivors. Because when I can help one of them heal, then it helps me heal.
Listen, that just kind of shook me to my core when you said, 9 years later, like really, like really, like now I'm supposed to trust you. And I think that is one of the biggest parts is that there is this inherent mistrust with the Black community and the legal system. So we just don't trust it, even when you're coming back saying, okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to move forward with this? And it's like, okay, so now you just want to put me through this again when the first time turned out the way it did. So I want you to expand a little more on what supporters, friends, families, spouses, those who are supporting survivors.
Yeah.
How can they support them best in ways that truly honors their experiences and their needs without being intrusive?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is we got to be okay with just being present, right? And being present and not saying anything. I think, especially in our culture, we have been taught that we are supposed to have a response for everything.
Yes.
Like Big Mama and them die, and you just supposed to say, well, Jesus wanted them better and loved them.
Girl, don't nobody want to hear that mess.
And it's the same when you're working with a survivor, right? Like they don't want to hear that same rhetoric, right? So I think we got to first be okay with just showing up and being present and not saying anything. Because I will tell you, it was those moments when people wasn't saying anything, but they were physically there that meant the world to me, right? I think the other thing is you got to let them lead the conversation. So don't go into it poking and prodding in where was you at? What was you doing? Who was you with? What was you with? Like, don't go into all of that. Like, let them lead the conversation. Let them get comfortable, talking about it. Like, it took me years to be okay with telling my family that I had gotten sexually assaulted. Right? Like I didn't tell my family for years that I got sexually assaulted in 2013. I told my family in 2017. And the only reason why I told them in 2017 was because I wrote it in a book and it was about to come out. And I was like, well, shit, before they get this
before
book,
they read it. Yeah.
Might as well sit down and have this conversation. Right? So understand that it's going to take a survivor a very long time to find the courage to say something, to tell something. And so just be willing to embrace them in the moment. And again, that simple, it wasn't your fault will do wonders. I think the other thing I would say is watch your language, right? Watch the words that you use, watch the questions that you ask, because a lot of times they come off very judgmental. And the last thing a survivor wants to feel is judged, because it's that same judgment, the reason why they don't get help. Right. Yes. And so if you love this person and you really want them to get help, don't judge them. Right. Don't be very mindful of what you say. And then I would say, too, mirror their language. Right. Everybody doesn't call themselves a survivor. Some people call them a victim. So if that's how they identify, don't be like, well, you're not a victim. No, that's how they identify in the moment. Right. I tell people it's a process to go from victim to survivor, from survivor to thriver. Everybody don't end up there. Right. And so you got to be willing to mirror their language and use the words that they're using. But definitely be present, be okay with not saying anything, and let them lead the conversation.
I absolutely love that, because that could not be more true. Because sometimes your presence is all that's needed. We don't need you to say nothing. We don't need you to talk about you going to bust somebody upside the head.
Yeah.
We don't need all that in the moment. In the moment, we just need to feel safe.
Yeah.
We need to feel safe. We need to feel protected. We need to know that what happened to us had nothing to do with anything that we did. There was nothing that we did to cause it. And I think that language is so important. That is so key.
Yeah.
Whether it's an adult or a child, to inform them that it was not your fault. what
Yeah.
happened to you. There was nothing that you did to bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
So you emphasize real, raw, and relevant results.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a success story where you've seen a transformation in an organization's approach to survivor support?
Yeah, man, there's so many. I would probably say probably the most recent one. I did a 2-part workshop series for Pennsylvania Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And they hired me after they saw me train at the National Sexual Assault Conference a year ago in DC. Definitely hired me to do cultural sensitivity and community engagement. And I think what was amazing about training over 100 rape crisis center staff throughout the state of Pennsylvania was, one, how engaged they were, but also how the light bulbs just started to come on. Because I think a lot of times when we think about community partnerships, we stick to the same type of people: law enforcement, rape crisis center staff, hospital staff, right? And so for me, I wanted them to think outside the box, right? I started really, again, because survivors are everywhere. I literally were like, listen, you're overlooking the libraries, you're overlooking barbershops, you're overlooking the beauty salons, right? You're overlooking, the nightlife, all these different. And so to see the light bulb come on and them being like, oh man, like we wasn't thinking about this. Like we weren't thinking about these people. We weren't thinking about sororities and fraternities because they have a history of activism. We weren't thinking about, going to our retail stores and our coffee shops and our local mom and pops, because again, survivors are everywhere. So I think for me is when I can get a shift in their thinking, then it trickles down to everything else, because then they start to realize like, oh, wait, I've been thinking about this whole community engagement the wrong way. I've been really thinking that it has to be one way. And that's where creativity and innovation kicks in. And now they're starting to realize, wait, I can expand what I'm doing and do it differently. So I would say that's probably one of my most recent success stories, because it was the light bulb moments that went off for them.
Yeah, I love watching light bulb moments.
Yeah.
What is one myth or misconception about sexual violence that you wish more people understood?
Dang. I think the biggest one is that people usually, if somebody's saying that they've been sexually assaulted, they're lying. So we see that a lot. I always think about Cassie, right? When she first came out and shared like what happened with her with Diddy, like it was 100% like, oh, you clout chasing, you lying, all of that stuff. And the truth of the matter is, and the fact is that less than 5% of sexual assault cases are found to be untrue.
Wow.
Less than 5%. So I always tell people, we got 95.999% of cases that are actually accurate.
Yeah. Wow. That's like, y'all. And especially when you think of the number of people, I think there's a study that showed that 3 out of 4 people have experienced some sort of sexual violence. So if you see 4 people together, 3 of them have experienced some form of sexual assault, sexual violence, molestation.
Yeah.
Something that violated their sexual being. And to think that that small percentage is untrue, but yet so many are unbelieved.
Yeah.
It's very telling.
Very.
It's very telling. So what are some of the first signs that the leaders, the institution, whatever organization is actually listening and making meaningful changes within their organization to better serve survivors?
Yeah, I think for me, what I look for is implementation of what we talked about, right? Like it's not enough for you to get this knowledge. It's how you apply it, right? So I usually, when I'm working with an organization, I usually definitely follow up in 30-day, 90-day, and 6-month increments, right? Because I want to see, like, have you been applying what we talked about, right? And so one of the things I always leave a lot of organizations with is an action plan. And I break it up that way. Here's things you can do over the next 30 days. Here's some things you can do over the next 90 days. Here's some things you can do over the next 6 months. So definitely implementing what we talked about. I'd look on their social medias to see if they've changed some of the language that they've been using and the things that they've been using. I check out their website to see What are they doing on their website? Is there a lot more public facing information out there? Because a lot of organizations keep things hidden. And it's like, how are you supposed to be serving the public if the public don't know it exists? So you got to put it out there. So I look at those things. I might even, depending on what organization is, I might pop up on them, and just kind of get a sense of like the culture going forward. Like, are you still, if I'm walking through the doors, are you still very rigid and you got, Karen sitting at the desk, or is it more people that look like me? So those are like some of the things that I look for. I also look for public accountability, right? Especially in this time with everything that's going on with this administration, right? Like it's a lot of organizations that unfortunately have doubled down and like they took down their websites, they took down resources for marginalized communities. And that caused a whole lot of harm and distrust. And that was I did a whole TikTok about it, publicly speaking out about it, because I was like, listen, y'all are causing harm. Like you can't remove resources from marginalized communities because we got this clown in office, right? Correct. Who wants you to double down. And really that type of messaging says that you prefer your federal tax dollars than supporting the survivors that you claim as an organization, right? That you work for and you stand for. So those are the things that I look for. Like, are you taking public accountability? Are you taking a stand? Or are you quick to, like, I've literally watched so many organizations put up a coming soon page on their website because they don't want to get in trouble. And it's like, what?
Wow. Which makes the resources even more scarce.
Yep.
When you already have someone so hesitant to come forward in the first place. And that doubly negatively impacts specifically the Black and Brown community, who is disproportionately not believed in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, I want to switch a little bit to empowerment. I know you have the Couture Gala coming up on October 24th, y'all. Yeah. And I am so honored to be a speaker there. Yeah. Can you tell us about the vision behind this event and what inspired you to create it?
Man, listen, this was a God-given vision. I will tell you, I was sitting on my couch watching one of them reality TV shows and somebody was doing a gala and all of a sudden God was like, it's time for you to do your first charity event. And I was like, first of all, who doing a charity event and where? So I'm like, sir, you see my life. Hello. I'm busy over here. But no, he had dropped it on my heart and back in 2024. And I said, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, you got to first give me a team. Cause I was like, Leah by herself, while she a movement by herself, right? I need a team. So he began to literally lay people on my heart, like piece by piece. He was like, yep, ask this person, ask that person, ask this person, that. And everybody I had asked literally was like, yeah, like hands down, like I got you. Let's do it. And so once I got the team together, we started planning September of last year. And I was just like, listen, I just want one night where survivors feel seen and heard and validated. And the Courage Couture Gala for me is so personal because I'm creating a space that I never got. Like, I didn't get that. I didn't get somebody looking at me and being like, I believe you, right? Yeah. I hear you. Like, I didn't get that. And so I wanted one night for survivors of all colors, all races, all ethnic groups to feel seen, heard, and validated. And to really just be amongst community. Because I think a lot of times what keeps us from healing as well is that we don't have other people that we can lock arms with. We don't have other people that have been through this same thing that can say, come on, let me take you with me. So I really wanted a night just for us and allies and our loved ones, but for us to finally have community, have community. So that is what the Courage Couture Gala is all about. It's just that one night. Like, I'm like, you ain't got to be mom, you ain't got to be dad, you ain't got to be nobody. Like, you can just be you. And you can find your people because everybody in that room is either a survivor, a loved one of a survivor, they're a community member, or they're an ally. Like, I was very intentional about cultivating that type of space because, again, I didn't get that. And so I'm like, if I can give it to someone else and people can leave that Friday night feeling like, wow, like I got a sister I could call. I got a friend. I got somebody. I don't have to go through this by myself, then I've done my job. So that's the vision behind it.
Listen, when I tell y'all, I am so excited. The name alone, Courage Couture, is so powerful So can you share the connection between fashion and the empowerment and healing of survivors? I mean, I already know it from my own personal experience, but you share it with them.
Yeah,
Share
because,
with the
I think
audience.
we forget that like fashion is a form of activism. Like it really is. Like every movement that has ever been started, their fashion was incorporated into it somehow. And so it's a form of activism. It's something about when you come together in your best dress on one accord that it just sparks a movement, right? And so that's why I wanted to make sure that it was black tie. It was very, fashion was very incorporated in it because I'm like, yeah, fashion is a form of activism. Like
It absolutely
it
is.
literally is. Like, look, if you track and trace any feminist movement out here, they had incorporated fashion somewhere. And so that was really what I wanted to do. The courage piece came because, again, it takes courage to stand and to be able to say, this happened to me. Like, literally, one of the members on my team is just now publicly talking about hers just to help raise the funds for it. Like, first time ever. And she just she told me, we met the other day and she was just like, because of this event, like, I feel like God is pushing me out there. And he's just like, it's time. And I'm like, yeah, because more people need to hear your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
More people need to know they're not alone, right? And so, yeah, it's the courage to stand in it, but it's also like, come with your best dress and stand in your activism because fashion is a form of activism.
Y'all, I remember when I got that push, when I got that nudge, and y'all, when I tell y'all, I like virtually fought Leah for a year.
Yep.
It was a virtual fight, y'all. So tell the attendees what they can expect from the gala. What's the vibe, the mission? I mean, you've already said that it's going to be black tie. So we know we're going to be in our best dress. What's the mission? And what impact do you hope that it leaves on the attendee?
Man, that night is going to be powerful. So we have we have the program. We have you speaking as one of the survivors. We have an incredible keynote speaker, my girl, Dr. Dominique. Let me tell you something. I be girl fanning about this woman. And it's so because she'd be like, I be girl fanning about you. It's nothing like a strong Black woman that's just incredible in what she does. She's a mental health therapist and she's a survivor herself. And so she's going to be sharing her message on resilience and how do we bounce back from it. My MC is a survivor. Like when I tell you the survivors is coming outside, they coming outside. Like majority of my team is survivors. And so we're going to have some good food because let me tell you something, that ain't no me, no Leah like to eat. She a foodie. So I had to get the best of the best with the caterer. So, we're going to have some good food. We're going to have some dancing. I have an incredible DJ. Got my photographer that she's going to be out there taking pictures and the videographer. And really it's just a night of just celebration, right? Like as much as we're telling these stories, I want people to feel celebrated. I want people to find community. I want people to feel compassion. I will be announcing. So just look, you get an exclusive here. But I will be announcing the scholarship fund. So I have a scholarship fund that's starting called Thrive and Rebuild Educational Scholarship Fund. God had laid it on my heart to create this scholarship fund to help survivors of sexual violence and be able to offset some of those costs that it goes to going back to school. So the fund will open the day of. And then I got a big event coming that's going to be happening in April of 2026. But you got to come to the gala to find out all the details about that. Like, I ain't going to tell you. I'm just telling you.
All right, y'all. So for those listening who want to support the gala or get involved in any way, what are the best ways they can do so?
Yeah. All right. So go to the website, Save Me, that's with 2 A's, .org. So SAAVE me.org. On there, you can click where it says Courage Couture Gala, and literally you can either donate to our online fundraiser. Definitely get on the wait list, but get on the wait list like ASAP because tickets are about to go on sale. And you can also look at our sponsorship tab where you can sponsor. So we're always looking for sponsors. Shout out to all the incredible sponsors that have been sponsoring thus far, all our incredible donors thus far. But yeah, those are the ways that you can definitely check it out. Or just hit me up, shoot me an email, info@leahmforney.com, and tell me that you want to be down with the gala, and I'll send you over the info.
Now, I think you told me that tickets go on sale April 13th. Is that what you told me?
So early bird tickets go on sale April 6th. But if you on the wait list, you can get your tickets at a discounted rate a week before the public. So that's why you better get on that wait list.
That's coming fast, right? Like That's coming fast. And like by the time this episode come out, oh, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all gonna make that. Sorry, y'all.
Listen.
Sorry in advance. But yeah, y'all please get the tickets. Please get those tickets. It is going to be an amazing, powerful, empowering night for so many of us. So Leah, your work is so powerful.
Thank you.
How can our listeners support just your everyday mission of creating survivor-centered spaces?
Yeah, I tell people, follow me everywhere on these social media streets. I'm Leah M. Forney everywhere. April is coming up. 30 Days of Sam. If you're in the DMV area, you'll probably see me at a whole bunch of community events. So just say what's up, because I'm out here in these streets for sure. So definitely say what's up. But yeah, follow me on social media, Leah M. Forney everywhere. If you want to work with me, go directly to my personal website, www.leahmforney.com. That's where you can find all the information about the ways you can work with me, bring me to your organization. But yeah, follow me on social media. I'm there.
One last question. Okay. For those who may be struggling right now, what message do you want to leave them with today?
Here's what I would say. If you are a survivor listening and you're struggling right now, first and foremost, let me say I see you. I hear you. I'm holding space for you. It really wasn't your fault. There's nothing you could have said, did, or done that would have changed the outcome. And I want to encourage you to find help. Know that you don't have to go through this alone. Know that you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to struggle in silence. There literally are organizations out there such as mine and so many others that are doing this work every single day on your behalf. So just find your community, find your tribe, but do what's necessary for you to not only heal, but also redefine justice.
Thank you again so much, my friend Leah, for coming on the show today. Family, thank you so much for tuning in again to another episode of the Melanin Wellness Podcast. Now remember, everything that we talked about in today's episode will be in the show notes. Hop on those tickets for the Couture Gala as they are selling fast already. And again, family, everything that we've discussed in this episode will be in the show notes. All the links to connect with Leah, the links to get your tickets, and the links to connect with me. Take care of yourselves, family. Stay informed and keep healing. Until next week.